To whom shall I speak and give warning so that they hear? See, their ear is uncircumcised, and they are unable to listen. See, the word of Yahweh is a reproach to them. They do not delight in it. So here's part of the problem. He says, I speak and I give warning so that they hear. Now remember, we're not talking about those outside the camp, those who are of the Gentiles, of the Goyim, etc., the outsiders. These are those he calls my people. So they have no excuse except, what did it say? Oh, their ears were uncircumcised. In other words, there was stuff going on in their ears that needed to be cut out and removed. And so remember, we've talked about this many times. There's 3 voices. Well, some of you may have more, but most of us have 3 in your head. If you have more, we can counsel that at a separate time. Oh, don't laugh. I've counseled that several times with people. But, you have at least 3. You have the self-sovereign you, you're the voice, the spirit in man, right? We talk about there's more than one spirit also. There's the spirit of Elohim, the spirit in man, the spirit of Hasatan. Well, each one of those has a voice in your head, trying to get your attention, trying to guide and lead you in a direction. And the biggest problem is you. Remember, we've talked about this many times. Hasatan is an opportunist. He's not a creator. He wants to encourage you to do. He doesn't give you the inspiration in the first place. He doesn't place the idea or thought in your head. So you're the one who came up with the thought, and so that's the thought that has to be circumcised. See, remember, we talk about what are you thinking, and we talk about how thoughts, then desires latch onto it. It's Hasatan that wants to push the desire linkage to the wrong thought. Get you all excited about that wrong thought. He's encouraging you to get emotional about that wrong thought. And so that's where he's using this metaphor, this picture for us of an uncircumcised ear. So we're not cutting the ear off. It's the hearing. We're not cutting away the things we shouldn't be listening to. Maybe that's a better way to put it. We need to cut away and remove the wrong things we're listening to, the things that are encouraging us to go in the wrong direction or tempting us or whatever it is that's going in the wrong way. I think that would be a fitting connection then for those who tickle the ears. There are teachers out there that people are listening to and hearing. You know what? They need to be cut off. You need to stop listening to those people, the ones that are leading you or encouraging you to go in a wrong direction. And we see many verses that we read in the prophets that talk about how, the prophets prophesied falsely and the people loved it because their ears were not circumcised. Oh, the people loved it so. And we have verses that say that. So he says, to whom shall I speak and give warning so that they hear? Well, I can't really warn anybody if they're not open to listening to me and not listening to everybody else. I teach, lots of people out there teach, but those who are being tutored by me, let's just call it that way, those that come to me for instruction, some of them really struggle with some of the things I say, not because necessarily I'm wrong, but because they still have not circumcised that part of their hearing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about that a lot of you are still struggling to let go of where you came from. You were raised in a certain way. You grew up, even if it wasn't in your house, as you got to be adults. Because some of you, have been an adult out of the house a lot longer than you were in a house. In other words, you were maybe in your parents' house for 18 or so years, and now you're in your 50s or 60s. You've been out of that house a long time. But in that time, you experienced things. You had things that then came in from thoughts to desires to habits to behavior patterns. And so then it becomes a way. It becomes a way of thinking, a habitual way of thinking. And so Christianity did that to you very well, most of you. And so a lot of you, when you struggle with things that I teach and things that the book actually says, is because you're banging up against the Christianity you can't let go of. And remember, I'm not talking about letting go of the Bible. I'm talking about letting go of a system of teaching the Bible in a very skewed way. Some of it was very good, some of it was very true, but it was skewed because a lot of it was very wrong and very not true. And it was very hard because there was so much truth there for you to filter the differences. And now that you're learning to filter, it's hard for you to let go because some of it really worked well for you then. Am I making sense here? And so now you're thinking, well, but I did this and it worked, then why would I need to not do it now? Well, I think you're making a disconnect there. You know, everybody who comes into belief had an experience. They did. Whether it's belief in Yeshua and Yahweh, whether it's belief in Hare Krishna, Buddha, Hindu, Taoist, doesn't matter. Whatever it's a belief in, they came to that belief. If they weren't just raised with it, if they made their own choice, something happened in their life that brought them into that belief. And then when they got there, things happened there that were miraculous, and I put in quotes because I don't know what really happened, but things that happened to strengthen your being there. Guess what that did? It affected your thinking process, didn't it? Remember, we're talking about thoughts. The people are going through that same problem here in Jeremiah. A certain amount of things always went well and kept happening, and they forgot the real source of that. They started thinking they didn't need the true source because, after all, things were happening the way they had always wanted them to happen without the true source. But the problem is they weren't just doing it without the true source. They were linking incorrectly that the source was actually helping them, even though they weren't doing it the way he said. Did I confuse everybody, or did that make sense? They were experiencing what looked like blessings. They were like, you know, like we're going to read verses that talk about where they say peace, peace, when there's no peace. But they're looking like, but look, everything looks fine now. Well, yeah, on the brink of disaster, Babylon hasn't showed up yet. And the people go out and scout, and they don't see them coming. And they're thinking, well, they're not coming. They're not heeding the warnings. The signs are not there for them to see, physically to see. They don't believe the prophets. They're not believing the Creator. And so we have that same challenge. And we're trying to remember, we always want to say, how do I see me in this? And so there are going to be challenges when you're starting to observe and understand the instructions from above, the true instructions from above, and try to match them with what you were always raised with. Because I can promise you right now, well, not right now, it's Saturday. Tomorrow, in churches all over the place, signs and wonders are going to happen. People are going to experience healings. They're going to experience amazing things being done. And you know what miracles are for? What's the purpose of miracles? To strengthen belief. So those miracles are going to strengthen their belief that they're in the right place. And some of you had that struggle leaving those places because you saw so much signs and wonders. Now, I'm not here to tell you what the source is of those signs and wonders. Abba, at the very minimum, allowed it to happen. Let's not be very quick to say he caused. I don't know what he always causes. We certainly know that everything happens he allows. Some of it he causes. Some of it is something that he actually initiates, but some of it doesn't come from him, but he allows it to happen. Some of it the enemy is pushing as an agenda. Some of it's just time and chance, but still he allows it. Because he wants us to think, and not just experience and emotionally make choices. Because, boy, it does get the emotions up when you see the healings and the miracles happening. But you know what? Those things happen in every pagan religion too, don't they? Let's not kid ourselves. Because people will say something like, for example, well, we did all of this in Jesus' name. So we said Jesus and all this wonderful stuff happened. And then, does that endorse using the name? Well, we have those in Matthew that came up to Messiah and said, Lord, Lord, we did all the stuff in your name, which meant it happened, it worked. And he said, get away from me, I didn't know you. We didn't have a relationship like you thought we did. 1 John says those that say they know him or have a relationship and don't keep the commandments are lying. I don't mean lying like they're purposely lying, like we would think someone knows the truth and they're spinning it and lying. In other words, they don't know that that's just untrue. Those who say they know him and don't keep the commandments don't realize that they don't really know him. So what they're saying is untrue is a better translation in 1 John as opposed to lying. What they're saying is just not true. They don't really have a relationship with him. This, again, is a thinking process that really can cause us huge problems. I hate to be as blunt as I'm going to be, but Christianity in the main is a cancer. In other words, it comes into your body, into your system, into your spirit, and it metastasizes. It spreads through your whole system. And if you don't get every piece of that out, it will skew how you come into Torah observant belief in Messiah. It will affect your ability to truly embrace and shema and be instructed, because you will sit there going, but I don't get it. Well, the reason you don't get it is because there's still stuff in there that needs to be circumcised out of your hearing. You still have hearing that has not been completely circumcised out. He's given you eyes, he's given you ears and a heart, all to receive, to see, to hear, to receive. But if you haven't gotten rid of the other things that could cause it to be somewhat skewed, all right? If I put a headset on you, big, headset on you, and don't put anything through it, you can still hear me, but it might be a little bit muted, even though you're wearing something that's blocking the sound a little bit. But what if I played somebody else talking a little bit in your ear while I'm talking? Is that going to make it more challenging for you to hear me correctly? And so that's the thing. Even though you've been given the ears to hear, and you're hearing me, let's assume I'm Yahweh for a second, and you're hearing me, but if there's anything else happening that's distracting you or louder, because you haven't shut it off or turned it off. How many of you have done this either with a spouse or with your children, and you're trying to talk to them, but they're listening to something, and you finally have to go over to them and say, turn that off. Because in the conversation with you, they're getting the words wrong, or they're just getting it wrong. They're hearing something, but it's not correct. And so that's a challenge. And so we have to circumcise the hearing. And so this is where we have to remember, if we're struggling, don't always assume that you're struggling because the person you're hearing from is wrong. Now, it could be. I'm not saying discount that completely, but always first go to, I wonder if it's because I'm predisposed and I'm struggling because of my own predisposition, because of the indoctrinating that I've had. We've all been very well churched, whatever that means. Wherever you came from, you were very well indoctrinated and instructed in wherever you came from. And that presents challenges, doesn't it? Okay, that really presents challenges, because if you can't filter through, it's going to be really tough. Yet, I'm also going to tell you there's a way out of this. Be instructed. Be taught, be instructed, and that only happens if you got to circumcise your hearing. So circumcision is the idea of cutting away of something, right? Circumcise your heart, circumcise your hearing, circumcise your flesh. It's all the idea of cutting away something. Now notice it's the idea of cutting it away and removing it completely. See, we're not just deciding, well, I know that's wrong, or I know that's probably not the best idea. No, cut it out completely. Don't even have that thought anymore. Because if you don't, it's going to tempt you again. You have to remove it completely.